Grandpa and Grandma's house.
It was a bright, mild Sunday morning when we shook off the Comic-Con cosplay and made our way to visit an old friend in North Denver via the Valley Highway, bypassing the industrial suburb known as Commerce City.
It was probably the most violent area.
Our friend was a police officer in Commerce City back in the 1960s and 70s. He, with a troop of fellow Commerce City officers, traveled to Chicago for a methods and tactics seminar in 1968. That's right, on the heels of the 1968 Democratic Convention, where scores of protesters were beaten bloody and hauled off in paddy wagons.
That's exactly what I was doing. Was I went for a seminar in tactics and control during the 68 Democratic Convention.
I wanted to see if our friend's thinking had changed over the years in light of recent events in Ferguson, Baltimore, and the fact that citizen police confrontations are more likely captured on video.
So far, there are 3 officers that have been charged with the fatal shootings this year. In all 3 cases, I should point out, there was video that captured some or all of the incident.
Brooke Gladstone is a longtime media analyst and co-host of the On the Media podcast distributed by NPR. Gladstone often refers to a narrative bias, serving as often as not to cloud the truth with a resonant but not necessarily true story.
These cases were so significant to people, they created so many questions and so much discussion.
This particular narrative is compelling and so deeply ingrained in the cultural zeitgeist that it stands as a given among a substantial segment of society. Even more troubling is the possibility that it could be right. The narrative is thus: if anything good is to come out of Michael Brown's fatal shooting in Ferguson, it is that the death of this teenager shined a public spotlight on a plague of shootings involving white police officers and unarmed black men. And so maybe now we can begin to address the deep-seated racism fueling it.
What about the racial aspect of this debate? Probably the number that's most often quoted is that among the unarmed people who were shot by officers, they were disproportionately of color.
Some say individual racism among officers is almost understandable, since many senior officers were raised in an era still plagued by the shadow of Jim Crow. However, some believe there still exists, in many parts of the country, a deeply ingrained institutional racism, the kind that prevents local systems from turning the wheels of justice against an officer simply on the merit of establishment fraternity.
30% of black people who were killed by police and in our database turned out to be unarmed. That was twice as big a proportion of those white people who were killed by police.
John Swain is a reporter for The Guardian U.S., currently working on a database for journalists to accurately take the current narrative to task. The Washington Post has embarked on a similar project. Kimberly Kindy explains.
Sure. Last year, I was covering Ferguson along with a lot of other reporters, and one of the first things that came to mind was, wow, how often does this happen? How often does an officer fatally shoot and kill somebody?
Before the tools of the mobile internet rendered each street confrontation potentially the next viral video, the particulars of any case could be sufficiently adjudicated based on the testimony of the officer involved and whomever was around to witness the event. But not anymore.
As Kimberly said, the video that is emerging from people with cell phones, people who are just recording as they pass by because they've been watching similar videos, this is changing things, and I think it's really challenging the authority of the word of police.
Yet things a person could do to guard against becoming an officer-involved shooting statistic are common wisdom widely shared across the racial divide.
Have you ever been face to face with a police officer and wondered, is he about to kick my ass?
With an air of professionalism, our North Denver friend denies racial overtones to anything he with his comrades did in the 1960s and 70s. They say a bad guy is a bad guy, and one of the skills most crucial to being an effective police officer is knowing how to spot the bad guys and how to bring them to heel.
You got to know what, if anyone has committed a violation, what they've committed, and what they might be charged with in the event that they had done something.
And sometimes bringing them to heel requires brutal force.
And I went through the window and by hand, I picked him up to drag him up to us so I could talk to him. And I was getting nowhere, and he was babbling. And when I couldn't control him, I had a nightstick that was a small one. And I pulled that nightstick out and went, whoop, 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 hitting him in the head. And he bit me on the stomach. And I commenced to wail on this guy, which I got in a little bit of trouble for. But I said, Captain, this guy bit me. Okay. So anyway, we got him corralled and in jail.
Like soldiers in harm's way, our North Denver friend and his buddies were focused on making it through another shift, whole.
And there was a service station guy that came out to see what was going on. And I told him, I said, pick up the radio in my car and say 1010 at 63rd and Federal. Everybody in the world goes to a 1010. I mean, everybody. And John was going so hard and so fast that he tore the tires off the rim. And the rim was just red hot. And he come over to help me with this guy.
Larger community issues like the causes of economic inequality, limited citizen mobility, or control over one's own destiny do not factor in the grind of day-to-day decisions for officers on the street. However, common sense would tell anyone...
Everybody knows, if the police have to come and get you, they're bringing an ass-kicking with them.
Chilling video obtained by ABC News early today. It shows a South Carolina police officer opening fire on a man running away. It started with a routine traffic stop, and it's difficult to watch. You can see the officer right there. He draws his gun and begins firing. The man running struck several times. He does not survive. Our team taking that video to the police department today, where they learned authorities were interviewing the officer. And tonight, just a short time ago, the police chief and the mayor revealing that officer will be charged with murder.
The system's responsiveness or otherwise to unjustified killing can set the wheels of anger or otherwise in motion. With murder charges brought against Officer Slager and the increasing presence of cameras on the streets, potentially recording any interaction between officers and the community, what will change? Perhaps we can come to grips with the dusty remnants of racism in our country. But while we grapple with the facts and what those facts mean, it's important to appreciate the role police officers play in a world where human-on-human cruelty has been on a steady and sharp decline since the Middle Ages. These officers are human too, and very often they feel called to serve, compelled by a sense of duty, a force that makes them think they can help, that they should serve. And they do. For TMN Audio Vision, I'm Ron Rolfe.